Hello everybody, my name's David and welcome to another edition of Everything's Photography. This week we're going to be covering some post-production and a little fun little trick that I did over the weekend, and I call it the frame effect. If you've obviously seen the picture on the front of this video, you'll see what I mean. Now, I'd like to say that I did this with a Nikon D810, but you can do it with any camera. I did this with frames. You don't need to use frames, you can use anything you want, car tyres, whatever you want will work with this. Now the very first thing that I did is I took a photograph of the background on its own with nobody standing there whatsoever. So I've got my background here. And this is just a little studio I have at the end of the garden. So I took a photograph of just the background, and then the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to open that picture with Photoshop. I shoot everything in RAW. You don't have to. If you don't shoot everything in RAW, don't worry. You won't get this screen. You'll just go straight to Photoshop with a JPEG or whatever it is you shoot in. But I shoot everything at RAW. Now, the very first thing that I do here is generally I would adjust these sliders myself. But I want everything to be completely uniformed on this. So the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rely on the Photoshop's AI. So I'm going to click auto. If you can see, that's up here, auto. And that's just going to auto what the AI thinks my picture should look like. Now, again, they're going to be a portrait. I know there's nothing there at the moment, so I'm now going to go to Adobe Portrait. And I like to give everything, when you're shooting in RAW, it doesn't sharpen your image, it doesn't do anything to your image. You do need to do all that yourself. So the very next thing I do, and the only other thing I do in Camera Raw on this effect, is I go to detail, which is down here, and sharpening here, I turn that up to 80. Let's keep the sharpening on the same level, and then I open that. From that tab down the bottom there, look. So now once I've got that opened in Photoshop, that's a good start. I then minimize Photoshop and I come back into my folder where my pictures are, and I move on to the next picture, and the next picture that I have is happens to be my girlfriend's son Ian. So anyway, I then move this photo into Photoshop. So I move this into Photoshop, and again it's moved me to Camera Raw. So again, we want everything to be uniformed. Now, just to let you know, the reason that we took a photograph with nothing in it at the beginning is because all of this stuff here, as you can see that I had in the shot, as you'll see, can be removed really easily, and we've still got the background to go by. I kept Ian standing in the same spot every single time. If you notice, his toes are just to these corners of the backdrop, and that's how we knew he was standing in the same place. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can have the subject standing in different places and have different backgrounds. But the reason I do it is simply because it's very hard to judge where your boxes are going to be if you've got no background to judge it by. But you'll see what I mean by that in a minute. So now I'm going to do the same thing I did last time. I'm going to auto. I'm then going to come down here and I'm going to hit Portrait. I'm then going to come down to Detail. It's already opened for me, and I'm going to move that to 80. Okay, that's actually 81. Let's knock that back to 80. And then I'm going to come back down here and I'm going to click Open. and Photoshop's opened that on another layer. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the lock. When you see your layers panel down here, where your first layer is always locked automatically. To turn this lock off, you just simply go to the lock there and click on the mouse, and you'll find that that lock goes away, and then we can do stuff to this picture. I'm now going to get now there's two ways of doing this. If you've got an up-to-date version of Photoshop, you can Command C on a Mac, Control C on a Windows, go to the original picture, Command V on a Mac, Control V on a Windows computer, and that copies and pastes that. I'm just going to pop that layer into the bin. Now, to put layers into the bin, you just simply grab hold of that layer and down to the trash bin. The reason I'm doing that is because if you don't have the latest copy of Photoshop, I just want to show you how I move that over manually. So I then go to my Move tool, which is here at the top of the tools. I grab anywhere on the screen and I can then move this picture. I move the picture up, keeping hold of the left hand side of the mouse. I hover it over there, I bring it back down, and I let go of the mouse, and it does the same thing. It copies and pastes. Now, with my picture here, as you can see, I've got a light going across here, and I'm going to use that to line my picture up. Find something in your pictures to also line your pictures up. So I'm going to get this picture and I'm going to go up here, and I can see that my light is here, so I can just play with it around here, move it there, and I'm pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that, and that's completely lined up. I'm now going to go to the Quick Selection tool. I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to left click on the mouse and just run the mouse round the outside of my frame, and that selects my marching ants round the frame. Now, as you can see, that's now just round the frame. I really want his hand as well, so I'm just going to push this out slightly here, and then we've got his hand, and that's pretty good. That's a pretty good selection there of the frame and him. To be fair, I probably just could, to bring it back, click Alt on a Mac, or I believe Control on a Windows, and left click on the mouse, and that brings your marching ants back inwards for you if you need to, just to tidy that up. Now, Command J on a Mac or Control J on a Windows, and that brings your selection into another layer. So if we come up to the layers here and I click off the bottom layer, the layer underneath the top layer, there you go, there's my selection. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click off the layer underneath, and that's the first part of our picture done. I'm now going to go back to the folder where my pictures were, and I'm going to select the next picture of the sequence. Now, as you can see here, look, this picture is a little bit lighter than this picture, and this is why I always use auto on camera raw, because that'll bring everything together for us. So the third picture I've got in the sequence, as you can see, is Ian holding the the frame in a diagonal form. I'm now going to open that with Photoshop. So each picture you can see is the same sequence of events. So now, as you already know, because we've run through this before, we're going to click Auto, which is up here on the right hand side. We're going to click Portrait. By the way, where I'm clicking that from, that's in Profile. If you can see where my mouse is, Profile there, Portrait, and then I'm going to come down to Detail, and I'm going to sharpen that to 80. That way you've got really good standardization on the quality of the pictures. Then I'm going to click Open down the bottom right hand side. I'm now going to come to the lock. I'm going to open that lock. I'm going to go to our Move tool, which is up here on the top left hand side of our screen. It looks like 4 arrows, almost like a compass. If you hover over, it'll tell you what it is there, the Move tool. I'm going to left click on my mouse. I'm going to drag that picture over to the tab where our work is, drag it back down and release, and there is our new layer. I'm now going to get this layer and I'm going to line it up. Remember, I'm lining mine up with this light here. You can line up with whatever you like, as long as you've got something there to line up, and that's pretty good. That's a pretty good line up there. And then, so the next step, once I've done that, quick selection tool, which is for me 1, 2, 3 down from the Move tool. Remember, if you hover over it, will tell you what they are. I'm going to left click on my mouse just around the edge here of the frame, and that will select that for me nicely. That's a good selection there. Bring that over, and I just want to nudge in here because I want his hand. And that's a pretty good selection. Little bits like this, don't worry too much about. I mean, I could nudge that down with my Alt key a little bit, but don't worry too much because there's a way of getting rid of that when we're done, and I'll go through that with you. So Command J on a Mac, Control J on a Windows, and that'll move that then straight to its own layer. And if you come over here, turn off the layer underneath your top layer. And by the way, to turn layers on and off is this little, it looks like an eye next to the layer icon. If I turn that off, I'm turning that layer on and off. So I want to turn that layer off, and that exposes the layer that we've just cut out. And as you can see there, we've got our first 2 elements of our picture. So now we're going to repeat the process again. We're going to go back to our folder, and I'm going to put in, we're going to find the next picture. I've put the pictures that I'm going to use in a folder originally, so there I could always go back to the same place to get them. I do advise doing that. I'll put them in the same place somewhere on your computer. So here's the next one, and it's Ian holding it up to his legs there. So I'm going to right click, open with Photoshop, just like we've been doing before. And again, I'm at Camera Raw. So I'm going to auto this. I'm going to portrait from profile. Remember, like we said, sharpen into, you've got it, 80. And then open that. Okay, so we've got Ian here holding the frame by his legs, and I'm just going to move that over. So remember, the first thing that we need to do here is we need to unlock there. So we come back over to here and we click the lock icon. We then get the move tool. I'll do it with the move tool this time because I showed you the other way last time. And we just drag that over to where our piece of work is, drag that down and sit that right there. And like I said before, the next thing we want to do is we want to make sure we've got that nicely lined up. And as you can see, I'm lining that up here with this light. Everything's lit up nicely there, lined up nicely there. I'm now going to get my quick selection tool, and I'm going to, like before, left click on the mouse and just get that frame in as best as I can. That's really good. And get that hand in. And you know what? On this one, I might just select that hand as well, because I think that will look pretty good. Now, Command J on a Mac, Control J on a PC. That'll put it again onto its own layer, and then like before, we simply turn the layer off that's below the top layer in our sequence. And so far, that's looking pretty good. We're getting the effect quite well here. So the next thing you want to do here is move this one to Photoshop again. And again the same, I'm in camera raw here, so I go auto, portrait for profile, sharpening to, dare I say it, 80, and that's in detail here. Open, that's then going to open this in Photoshop. So now we can unlock. So click on the lock icon there to unlock the layer. Come up here and get the move tool. Move this over to our piece of work and then drop it down here. And then again, line this up nicely with that light. There you go. Get our quick selection tool. Select the frame. Let's get a nice selection here of the frame. I'm going to nudge it in here again because we want his hand. We want his hand. That's a pretty good selection there. So on a Mac, like before, Command J to put it up onto its own layer. Control J on a PC and turn the layer off that's underneath that layer. And as you can see, that's a pretty good effect what we've got going on right there. So the next thing that I'm going to do to this picture is I'm going to get the crop tool, which is this tool here. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 down from the top. I'm guessing it looks like 2 set squares put together. It's called the crop tool. You get this border around the outside, and if you hover your mouse over anywhere here, you can move this up or down, left or right, and if you hover here and get the arrows that are bent, that means you can also move it from side to side. But on this particular picture, I'm going to bring this crop down to where I can't see any dark there, probably there. Now I know I can see some dark here, but I'm going to show you a way of getting rid of that also in a second. We've got a lot of wasted space in this picture as well, so I'm now going to crop the side in here. I'm going to crop this side into about here, I think. Yeah, it looks quite nice. I'm going to bring this crop up just so you can envision that he has got feet, even though in this particular instance we haven't given him any. And then I'm going to click return. Now, just to tidy things up, The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the bottom of my layers. I'm going to right click on the very bottom layer, which is called background. And as you can see, you get this dialog box here. I'm going to click flatten image. Now what that'll do is, and you get this, discard hidden layers, just click OK. What that's actually done is it's pushed all of our layers together and turned this into one picture. As you can see, we haven't got loads and loads of layers down there anymore, which means we can now do things to this universally without having to click on any other layers. If you come up here to the healing brush tool, if you click left on your mouse and hold it down, on one of these icons here, you'll get all the tools that are within that icon. I'm going to use the Spot Healing Brush tool. And then I'm going to come up here, as you can see, that's tiny. I'm going to come up here, click there next to this, and you can adjust the size. Can you see the size of that going up? Now, I think that's a pretty good size for what I want. Click it once and that goes away. So see this wire I've got down here? If I could just get rid of that. This black bit we've got, this black line we've got up here. If I click once, left click once here, hold down my shift key and click over here, it will give me a straight line. And that gets rid of that. And I think that's pretty good. It's been great. My name's David. I hope you try this because it is a bit of fun. Remember, photography is not for you to show everybody. It's for everybody to be impressed. It's for you to be impressed with your own work. So please don't listen to other people and keep enjoying your photography. And I look forward to seeing you in the next tutorial. Thank you very much.